Hey, Romeo and Shakespeare fans. Well, I'm sure by now you've heard that I've been getting some threats from a certain drummer about using a song by his former band in one of my upcoming episodes. All I can say is that if he was a real professional, he wouldn't have started crying wah wah as soon as I wanted to use one of his songs. I asked him if he would give me a release for it, but all I got was his photograph and a note that read, "No, no, no, no." Oh my, talk about being full of yourself. Now, I have to admit, I lost my temper and I told him, "Back off, Boogaloo." Now, I don't usually use that kind of language, but I felt in this case it was justified. And I don't care what he thinks. Finding another song that fits as perfectly as this one does for this episode, trust me, it don't come easy. And you know what? I'll take Peter Best over this guy any day. Anyway, the good news is that episode 23 is all ready to go, and I hope you'll enjoy it. No. Sorry, No. I don't know, I just don't. Hey man, what are you hassling me for? This is just a video, it's not my life. I don't know who the Beatles are. What are they, a band? Well, what are they? All right, so what's the big deal? There's millions of bands. Forget it, me? You should forget it. You're living in the past, man. You're hung up on some band from the 60s, man. What do you mean it's in bad taste? Are you crazy? It's William Shakespeare, for crying out loud. Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I'm in the studio right now and I'm getting ready to record. Oh yeah? Well, I'd like to see you try. Well, good day to you, sir. Bingo! Excuse me. I'll be right with you, folks. I'm sorry, Noble Titus. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. I'll tell you something really important that I think you'll understand. I'm very serious when I say that something needs to be done about Kieran and Demetrius for ravaging and mutilating your daughter Lavinia, and about that evil villain Aaron for talking you into cutting off your hand to spare your two sons' lives. I also think it's affected his hearing. Oh, please, say to me that you'll only focus on getting justice and not revenge, and let me be your man to approach the Tribune on your behalf. You truly are the woefulest man that ever lived in Rome, and when I touch a nerve, you need to speak up, because I think that the only time you feel happy inside is when you're thinking about getting even with Tamara. I must speak plainly to you. It's such a feeling that, my lord, I can't hide my fear that you're about to do something drastic. I can't hide my belief that Lavinia may pay the price for your anger, and I can't hide my concern that you won't be able to control your vengeance. Yeah, you got the motive, means, and opportunity to serve Tamara her own sons in a pie, but is that something you really want to do? I think you'll understand that I don't condone revenge, but I do believe you deserve justice. And when I say that something ain't right, I mean it. And so, to demonstrate my commitment to you, when you're busy preparing the banquet for the emperor and his wife, I want to hold your hand. Sorry, I'll speak louder. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand.
Hello, Governor.
Hello, Ringo. What do you want?
So you never heard of the Beatles, eh?
Oh, the Beatles! Right.
I warned you about messing with me tunes.
You wouldn't Hey, put that down! No, Ringo, no! Yuck. Talk about bad taste. What's in this pie anyway? Hey, wait. This isn't whipped cream. This is Blistex. I got Blistex on my fingers. In the 1982 film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Ricardo Montalban quotes an old Klingon proverb that goes, "Revenge is a dish best served cold," meaning that it's best to wait to take your revenge than to act immediately and irrationally. Well, have no fear, because in Titus Andronicus, you'll have some characters who plot their revenge and wait patiently, and others who act immediately and irrationally. So let's take a look at the plot. Immediately following the death of the Roman emperor, his two sons Saturninus and Bassianus squabble over who will be his successor. But just as their conflict is about to turn violent, a tribune named Marcus Andronicus announces that the people have chosen his brother Titus to be their new emperor. Titus has just returned to Rome after a victorious 10-year campaign against the Goths. Titus arrives bearing with him as prisoners Tamara, queen of the Goths, her three sons Alarbus, Chiron, and Demetrius, and her secret lover Aaron, who is a Moor. Despite Tamara's desperate pleas, Titus has her eldest son Alarbus executed as a sacrifice to avenge the deaths of his 21 sons killed during the war. Distraught Tamara and her two surviving sons vow to seek revenge on Titus and his family. Meanwhile, Titus turns down an offer to be the Roman emperor, saying that he's not fit to rule because of his age, and instead supports Saturninus' claim, who was then duly elected. Saturninus tells Titus that as his first act as emperor, he will marry Titus's daughter Lavinia. Titus agrees, but Lavinia is already betrothed to Saturninus' brother Bassianus, who refuses to give her up. Titus's sons tell Titus that Bassiana is in the right under Roman law, but Titus refuses to listen to them and accuses them of treason. During a scuffle, Titus kills his own son Mutius. This angers Saturninus, who then denounces the Andronici family for their behavior and surprises everyone by marrying Tamara instead. This puts Tamara's plans into motion as she plots her revenge on Titus's family. She advises Saturninus to pardon Bassianus and the Andronici family, which he reluctantly does, but only so that she could have greater revenge on them in the future. The next day, during a royal hunt, Aaron persuades Demetrius and Chiron to kill Bassianus so that they could take turns raping Lavinia. They do so and throw Bassianus' body into a pit and drag Lavinia away. Lavinia begs Tamara to just kill her outright, but the merciless Tamara refuses to do so. In order to keep Lavinia from revealing what they've done, they cut out her tongue and cut off her hands. Meanwhile, Aaron writes a forged letter which frames Titus's sons Martius and Quintus for the murder of Bassianus. Upon learning of his brother's death, Saturninus has Martius and Quintus arrested and sentences them to death. While walking through the woods, Marcus stumbles upon his mutilated niece Lavinia and takes her to Titus, who is still shocked because of the accusations made about his sons. Upon seeing Lavinia, Titus is overcome with grief. The evil Aaron goes to Titus and falsely tells him that Saturninus will spare Martius and Quintus if Titus, Marcus, or Titus's remaining son Lucius will cut off one of their hands and send it to him. Although Marcus and Lucius are willing, Titus has his own left hand cut off by Aaron and sends it to the emperor. Sadly, a messenger brings back Martius and Quintus's severed heads along with Titus's own severed hand. Out of his mind and hungry for revenge, Titus orders Lucius to flee Rome and raise an army among their conquered enemies, the Goths, which he does. Later, Lavinia writes the names of her attackers in the dirt using a stick held with her mouth between her two stumps. Meanwhile, Aaron is informed that Tamara has secretly given birth to Aaron's dark-skinned son, which will certainly anger Saturninus. And even though Tamara wants the baby killed, Aaron refuses, killing the nurse and the midwife to keep the child's race a secret. He then flees to raise his son among the Goths. Soon after, Lucius, marching on Rome with an army, captures Aaron and threatens to hang his infant son. However, in order to save the baby, Aaron agrees to reveal the entire revenge plot to Lucius. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Titus's behavior has become erratic, and his brother Marcius and grandson fear that he might be going mad. Tamara, Demetrius, and Chiron, who are also convinced that Titus is mad, dress up as the spirits of revenge, murder, and rape. The three of them approach Titus to persuade him to have Lucius remove his troops from Rome. Tamara, as revenge, tells Titus that she will grant him revenge on all of his enemies if he convinces Lucius to postpone his imminent attack on Rome. Titus agrees and sends Marcius to have Lucius join him for a feast at his house. Revenge then offers to invite the emperor and Tamara as well, and is about to leave when Titus insists that rape and murder stay with him. But after Tamara leaves, Titus, with the help of his kinsmen, has Chiron and Demetrius restrained, cuts their throats, and drains their blood into a basin held by Lavinia. Titus then tells Lavinia that he will grind their bones into powder, bake their heads into 2 pies, and serve them to their mother. The next day, during the feast at his house, Titus asks Saturninus if a father should kill his daughter if she's been raped. When Saturninus answers that he should, Titus kills Lavinia and tells Saturninus about her rape. The emperor is outraged by the accusations and calls for Chiron and Demetrius. But Titus reveals that they were baked into the pies and that Tamara has already been eating them. Titus then kills Tamara with his sword and is immediately killed by Saturninus, who is subsequently killed by Lucius to avenge his father's death. Lucius is then proclaimed emperor and orders Titus and Lavinia to be laid in their family tomb, Saturninus to be given a state burial, and that Tamara's body be thrown to the wild beasts outside the city. He orders Aaron to be hanged, but Aaron is so unrepentant to the end and only regrets that he did not do more evil in his life that Lucius decides instead that Aaron deserves to be buried chest deep and left to die of thirst and starvation. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in Titus Andronicus. All right, now let's take a more in-depth look at some of these characters. Titus Andronicus has just returned from a 10-year war against the Goths. He's a very black and white character who believes in honor and fighting for Rome. He's even willing to kill his own son Mutius rather than dishonor Saturninus, the newly named emperor of Rome. Titus is a very Job-like character whose brother Marcus calls the woefulest man that ever lived in Rome. Marcus is a member of the Roman tribune. Titus has lost nearly all of his 25 sons to war. Only a handful, including Lucius, survive and return home with him, where he meets his only daughter, Lavinia, and his grandson, young Lucius. Both Lavinia and young Lucius are innocents in this play. While Lucius serves as the audience's onstage personification of our reactions and emotions to all the gore, bloodshed, and injustice, Lavinia serves almost as a sacrificial lamb who falls prey to all of the vengeance. She's a pawn and an innocent victim who is silenced both physically and emotionally by numerous male characters in the play. She doesn't even speak up when Saturninus claims her for his bride, even though she's betrothed to his brother Bassianus. She also brushes off Saturninus's praise for Tamara and the withdrawal of his marriage offer to her. Later on, Titus has Lavinia collect the blood from Chiron and Demetrius after he cuts their throats, and then she willingly submits to a mercy killing by her father so that she doesn't bring further shame on her family. Saturninus turns out to be one of Shakespeare's worst political leaders of all time. He's arrogant, short-tempered, and selfish, demonstrates terrible judgment, holds grudges, is ungrateful, very gullible, and easily manipulated. Let's face it, with qualities like these, is it any wonder that this play has found an audience through so many different eras in the last 400 years who can relate to witnessing so many of these same shortcomings prevalent among their own political leaders? By the way, Saturninus is flighty like Richard II. He's bloody and impulsive like Richard III and has people murdered on a whim. He's ungrateful to people who help him, like Henry IV, and he takes bad advice from his wife like Macbeth and Cymbeline. Tamara, the queen of the Goths, has been imprisoned by the victorious Romans led by Titus. At first, she pleads to Titus to spare her firstborn son from being executed and hacked to bits in a Roman sacrifice, but he refuses, igniting her thirst for vengeance that will permeate throughout the rest of the play and only dies when Titus slays her. Despite the fact that the newly appointed Saturninus picks her to be his empress, she continues her adulterous relationship with Aaron, an evil villain whose only joy in life is to cause misery to others. Aaron also persuades and instructs Tamara's sons Demetrius and Chiron to rape Lavinia, cut out her tongue, chop off her hands, and kill her husband Basanius. When we return, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes in Titus Andronicus. No discussion of Titus Andronicus would be complete without discussing Shakespeare's reasons for making Aaron the Moor the most evil character in any of his plays. Although I've heard some commenters say that it was because he was a racist, that simply isn't true. If you pay attention to the text, you'll notice that Aaron is more heavily criticized for being an atheist and an amoral monster than he is for being dark-skinned. Obviously, Tamara doesn't mind his appearance. Lucius agrees to let his son live, so his skin color had no impediment there. So why did Shakespeare make this evil villain a Moor? Well, for one obvious reason. If Aaron wasn't black, the baby wouldn't have been black, and no one would have known that Aaron was the father. So you see, the primary reason for Aaron's skin color was to serve as a convenient plot device. And just remember, Shakespeare created all of these characters, so in effect, Shakespeare is really Aaron, Tamara, Chiron, Demetrius, Saturninus, Titus, young Lucius, and Lavinia. He allowed us to see all the richness of their characters, both good and evil, and contemplate them like we do today, 400 years after he wrote them, marveling at their complexities and still striving to understand them better. Shakespeare also uses disguises in this play when Tamara and her two sons come to Titus dressed as the spirits of revenge, rape, and murder. In Love's Labour's Lost, the king and his cronies dress up as Muscovites, and the women wear masks to cross their purposes. Disguises are also used in Much Ado About Nothing, Romeo and Juliet, Henry IV Parts 1 and 2 by Hal and Ned Poins, by Master Ford in The Merry Wives of Windsor, and in Henry VIII. We also have the banished Lucius, who joins a long list of other banished characters, such as Romeo, Coriolanus, Posthumus in Cymbeline, Henry Bolingbroke, Thomas Mowbray, and Exeter in Richard II, Sir John Falstaff in Henry IV Part 2, Sir John Fastoff in Henry VI Part 1, Gloucester's wife Nell, and Suffolk in Henry VI Part 2, Valentine in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Duke Senior and Rosalind in As You Like It, Alcibiades in Timon of Athens, Kent in King Lear, and Arcite in The Two Noble Kinsmen. There's also Aaron's forged letter, which leads to the deaths of Quintus and Martius. In Twelfth Night, Maria forges a letter to Malvolio, who winds up getting imprisoned and humiliated, while she gets and accepts a marriage proposal from Sir Toby Belch for her forgery. Of course, forged letters had much worse consequences for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in Hamlet, who both lost their heads in England. One of the most memorable and disturbing scenes is Act 2, Scene 3, when Bassianus is murdered and Lavinia is dragged off to be raped and mutilated by Chiron and Demetrius. Another disturbing scene is Act 5, Scene 2, when Titus turns the tables on Tamara and her two sons. In an aside, Titus says, "I knew them all. While they suppose me mad, I will o'erreach them. In their own devices, a pair of cursed hellhounds and their dam." This short comment is similar to Hal's "I know you all" soliloquy in Henry IV Part 1, in which he lets the audience know that despite his youth as a playboy, he intends to be a very serious king. We also see in this scene Titus cutting the throats of Kieran and Demetrius, but not before he fills them in on his plans to have them baked into pies and fed to their own mother. And in Act 5, Scene 3, we have the banquet in which Titus makes good to serve the dead remains of Tamara's sons to her and the emperor. And in rapid succession, we see Lavinia killed by Titus, Tamara killed by Titus, Titus killed by Saturninus, and Lucius kills Saturninus. Who said this play didn't have a lot of action in it? When we return, we'll take a look at some of the most powerful themes that run through Titus Andronicus. Most commentators agree that Titus Andronicus is an outlier among the major body of work that Shakespeare produced. Because of that, I want to use some outside sources to help you better appreciate this play. If you've ever seen Mel Gibson's 2004 film, The Passion of the Christ, then you know that this is a masterpiece that depicts the last day in Jesus' life. However, it is brutally violent and extremely disturbing. It often takes the viewer a while to mentally prepare oneself for everything you're about to experience. In this way, it's very similar to Titus Andronicus. While this is absolutely one of my least favorite plays, once you start watching it, it truly is riveting because of the content and the quality of the characters and the story. And just as importantly, it's virtually impossible to watch either of these productions and not notice something new every time you watch them. I once heard somebody reviewing a Bob Dylan concert. The review went something like this. The last time I saw Dylan in concert, it was brutal. He kept messing up the words. But the thing about Dylan is, even when he's awful, he's still sort of great. He's never mediocre. That's how I feel about this play. It's by far one of Shakespeare's poorest offerings, but there's still many aspects of greatness in it, especially in the language and the complexity of the characters. In college, I took 4 classes in art appreciation with the same professor. One thing I specifically remember her saying was that, I don't care if you like a work of art or hate it. I just want you to be able to explain why. So let's apply that scrutiny to Titus Andronicus. In many ways, it's like watching a gothic horror film. It's bloody, gory, very violent, sad, depressing, and hard to understand its point. Add to that its disturbing elements that the viewer is subject to, including a gang rape, murders, dismemberments, torture, cannibalism, potential infanticide, and human sacrifices. The characters are unjust, evil, vengeful, merciless, wicked, deceitful, brutally sadistic, and unlikable. Did I miss anything? So why are we watching this play again? There are some positives that we can look to. There's some justice in that Aaron and Tamara are punished in the end. Titus is finally vindicated, his family's honor is restored, and Lucius is made emperor. But more than that, we have the incredible language and dialogue throughout the entire play. Despite the nearly 3-hour bloodbath that the audience must endure, we are still mesmerized by the riveting action and the words that make these characters come to life. Finally, Harvard professor Marjorie Garber points out that there are always 3 time frames to consider in watching a Shakespeare play. We have when the action takes place. In this case, it's about 385 AD. Next, we have when the play was written, which was around 1593. And finally, we have when the play is performed and experienced by the audience. In this case, we're talking about the turn of the 21st century. When we look at this play from the perspective of when it took place, it was a very brutal time in ancient Roman history, following only 3 centuries after the birth of Christ. When we look at when Shakespeare wrote it, we see that there are some literary references that his audience would recognize, specifically Ovid's Metamorphosis and Horace's quote. And today, as we live in a post-9/11 world, we're used to seeing evil, injustice, and senseless brutality without reason or a clear understanding. By examining Shakespeare's works today, we gain an appreciation of what stories captured his imagination, how he presented them to the audience in his day, what similarities we see from 2,000 years ago, and most hopefully, what progress we've made since then. The play does have the theme of justice in it. After all, Titus is named emperor at the beginning, Lucius actually becomes the emperor by the end, and the Goths work with him to bring it about because of the treatment he's received from Rome and their former queen, who is now Rome's empress. There's plenty of injustice in this play as well. Alarbus is killed as a sacrifice according to the Roman custom. Saturninus makes Tamara, the imprisoned queen of the Goths, his empress. Quintus and Marcius are framed and beheaded for a murder they didn't commit. Poor Lavinia is raped, mutilated, and stabbed to death in a mercy killing, and Lucius is banished by the Roman tribune. By the way, I want to point out that once again, Shakespeare has Lucius banished by Rome, but returns with the aid of his former enemies, the Goths, to destroy the city. One would think that the tribunal would have known better than to banish a powerful warrior after treating his family so shamefully. As American philosopher George Santayana once said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And perhaps the most powerful theme that runs through this play is that of revenge. Not only is poor Lavinia gang-raped by Chiron and Demetrius, but the activity is actually known by, condoned, and encouraged by their mother. But you have to give it to Titus, who actually uses cannibalism to give Tamara her just desserts, so to speak. Although most people probably think that Iago in Othello is the most evil character in all of Shakespeare, he can't hold a candle to Aaron in Titus Andronicus. Richard III, Lady Macbeth, Edmund in King Lear, Lord Angelo in Measure for Measure, Dionysa in Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and Iachimo and Cymbeline don't even come close because Richard III, Lady Macbeth, and Edmund all wanted power. Lord Angelo lusted for Isabella, but confessed his crime. Dionysa tried to have Marina killed because she was looking out for her own daughter, and Iachimo selfishly wanted to win a bet, but suffered terribly for his actions and confessed his sins. But when we talk about evil, no one comes close to Aaron. In Act 5, Scene 1, Aaron laments, "If there be devils, would I were a devil, to live and burn in everlasting fire, so I might have your company in hell, but to torment you with my bitter tongue." Here he is in Act 5, Scene 3, when Lucius gives instructions for his punishment, saying, "Set him breast deep in earth, and famish him. There let him stand and rave, and cry for food. If anyone relieves or pities him for the offenses, he dies. This is our doom. Some stay to see him fastened in the earth." Unlike Iago in Othello, who decides he will remain silent, Aaron takes a different approach, saying, "Oh, why should wrath be mute and fury dumb? I am no baby, I that with base prayers I should repent the evils I have done. 10,000 worse than ever yet I did would I perform, if I might have my will. If one good deed in all my life I did, I do repent it from my very soul." Now you might think that Aaron has a decent side. After all, Titus slew his own son Mutius for honor, and Tamara ordered her illegitimate baby to be slain to hide her infidelity. But Aaron was willing to give up his own life in order to have his innocent son's life spared. But why did he do it? For love? For his paternal obligation and sensibilities? No, he did it out of pride and a need for power, control, and a chance to perpetuate a future legacy of evil that lives on after his death. In fact, it appears that Shakespeare made him an atheistic Moor in order to demonstrate that no Christian soul could ever have such an amoral and evil temperament. But as far as madness goes, like Hamlet, Titus is not actually mad. However, he uses the illusion of madness to dupe Tamara, Chiron, and Demetrius. As we saw with King Lear, he's driven mad because of the injustices and ingratitude he faced. We also saw that Othello was driven mad when he was played upon by the evil Iago, who convinced Othello that his wife Desdemona had been unfaithful to him. Perhaps the most obvious scene in which Titus appears to be going mad is Act 3, Scene 2, where Marcus kills a fly with a knife and Titus rebukes him for it. It's only after Marcus points out that the fly was black like Aaron that Titus applauds him for his actions. His madness resurfaces again in Act 4, Scene 3, when he urges his kinsmen to shoot arrows to send petitions to the gods for revenge. But let's look at Titus's reaction to the unsympathetic tribune's slaughter of his wrongfully framed sons, Quintus and Marcius. In Act 3, Scene 1, Lucius begs his father to stop imploring the stones for mercy for his 2 sons. He says, "My gracious lord, no tribune hears you speak." And Titus replies, "Why, 'tis no matter, man. If they did hear, they would not mark me. If they did mark, they would not pity me. Yet plead I must. Therefore I tell my sorrows to the stones, who though they cannot answer my distress, yet in some sort they are better than the tribunes, for that they will not intercept my tale. When I do weep, they humbly at my feet receive my tears, and seem to weep with me. And were they but attired in grave weeds, Rome could afford no tribune like to these. A stone is soft as wax, tribunes more hard than stones. A stone is silent and offendeth not, and tribunes with their tongues doom men to death." Although we see some glimpses of madness in his actions, Titus also rationalizes his actions quite lucidly, thus reinforcing the premise that one does not go entirely mad all at once, but more likely in degrees. When we return, we'll look at some of the most powerful lines in Titus Andronicus. You can't discuss the most powerful lines in Titus Andronicus without further examining the monstrous braggings of Aaron. In Act 5, Scene 1, we see just how evil he is. After making a deal with Lucius to spare his son's life, Aaron comes clean to his part in all the evil deeds that take place in the play. But note, unlike Iachimo and Cymbeline, his confession is not full of remorse, but instead he delivers it with shameful pride for his actions and their horrifying consequences. Aaron says of Chiron and Demetrius, "Indeed, I was their tutor to instruct them. That cotting spirit had they from their mother, as sure a card as ever won the set. That bloody mind, I think, they learned it of me, as true a dog as ever fought at head. Well, let my deeds be witness of my worth. I trained thy brethren to that guileful hole where the dead corpse of Bassianus lay. I wrote the letter that thy father found, and hid the gold wherein the letter mentioned, confederate with the queen and her 2 sons. And what not done that thou hast cause to rue, wherein I had no stroke of mischief in it? I played the cheater for thy father's hand, and when I had it drew myself apart, and almost broke my heart with extreme laughter. I pried me through the crevice of a wall, when for his hand he had his 2 sons' heads, beheld my tears, and laughed so heartily that both mine eyes were rainy like to his. And when I told the empress of this sport, she swooned almost at my pleasing tale, and for my tidings gave me 20 kisses. But if Lucius thinks that he's going to get an apology from Aaron, he's sadly mistaken. Listen to what follows when Lucius asks him, "Art thou not sorry for these heinous deeds?" "Aye, that I had not done 1,000 more. Even now I curse the day, and yet I think few come within the compass of my curse, wherein I did not some notorious ill, as kill a man, or else devise his death, ravish a maid, or plot the way to do it, accuse some innocent, and forswear myself, set deadly enmity between 2 friends, make poor men's cattle break their necks, set fire on barns and haystacks in the night, and bid the owners quench them with their tears. Oft have I digged up dead men from their graves, and set them upright at their dear friend's door, even when their sorrows almost were forgot, and on their skins, as on the bark of trees, have with my knife carved, in Roman letters, Let not your sorrow die, though I am dead. Tut, I have done 1,000 dreadful things as willingly as one would kill a fly, and nothing grieves me heartily indeed, but that I cannot do 10,000 more. When we return, we'll look at some of the major turning points in Titus Andronicus and some of the correlations to other Shakespeare plays. One of the major turning points in Titus Andronicus takes place right near the very beginning of the play in Act 1, Scene 1, where Tamora makes a very impressive speech imploring Titus to take mercy on her firstborn son. And like Portia's quality of mercy speech to Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, her words also fall on deaf ears. Here's what she says: "Stay, Roman brethren, gracious conqueror, victorious Titus, rue the tears I shed, a mother's tears in passion for her son. And if thy sons were ever dear to thee, oh, think my son to be as dear to me. Sufficeth not that we are brought to Rome to beautify thy triumphs and return captive to thee and to thy Roman yoke. But must my sons be slaughtered in the streets for valiant doings in their country's cause? Oh, if to fight for king and commonweal were piety in thine, it is in these. Andronicus, stain not thy tomb with blood. Wilt thou draw near the nature of the gods? Draw near them, then, in being merciful. Sweet mercy is nobility's true badge." What a great saying. "Thrice noble Titus, spare my firstborn son." Now, her plea is totally reasonable, but Titus's refusal of Tamora's request is the first major turning point in the play that leads to unspeakable bloodshed and acts of violence later on. In Act 2, Scene 3, we see Lavinia's desperate and fruitless attempts to beg a mercy killing of Tamora rather than have her sons defile her. Listen to her pleas. Tamora asks, "What beggest thou then, fond woman? Let me go." Lavinia says, "'Tis present death I beg, and one thing more, that womanhood denies my tongue to tell. Oh, keep me from their worse than killing lust, and tumble me into some loathsome pit, where never man's eye may behold my body. Do this, and be a charitable murderer." But Tamora answers, "So should I rob my sweet sons of their fee? No, let them satisfy their lusts on thee." So, sadly, Lavinia is despised, defiled, disrespected, disregarded, dishonored, and disfigured by Tamora's dysfunctional family. In fact, this whole scene is a disaster. Sorry about that. Moving right along, let's look at some of the major correlations to the other Shakespeare plays. Titus Andronicus opens up just after the former emperor has died. Hamlet and Henry VI, Part 1 both open up after the former kings of Denmark and England respectively have died. Titus is originally offered the position of emperor, but declines the position because of his age and selects Saturninus, who soon after treats him with much ingratitude and disrespect. In King Lear, the king gives away the running of his kingdom to his two eldest daughters because of his age, and is also treated with much ingratitude and disrespect. Saturninus marries Tamora, a woman who's been married before and has children from a previous marriage. The same is true about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, Cymbeline and his queen, and Edward IV and Lady Grey in Henry VI, Part 3. Lavinia uses Ovid's Metamorphosis, which includes the tale of Tereus and the rape of Philomela, to let her father and uncle know who raped her and cut out her tongue. In Cymbeline, Imogen is reading the tale of Tereus when she goes to sleep and is visually violated by Iachimo. The banquet at Titus's house in Act 5, Scene 3 is where one of the play's major turning points takes place. That's not unlike the banquet scene in Macbeth, where Macbeth sees Banquo's ghost, or the banquet scene in Timon of Athens, in which he feeds his sycophantic guests from large water pots before turning them out. The powerful warrior Lucius is banished from Rome and goes to his former enemies, the Goths, who agree to back him and destroy Rome. In Coriolanus, the powerful title character and warrior is banished by Rome and goes to his former enemies, the Volsces, who also agree to back him and destroy Rome. In Timon of Athens, the The powerful warrior Alcibiades, you guessed it, is banished by Athens and returns with a powerful army to destroy his former homeland. In Richard II, Henry Bolingbroke is also banished from England, returns with an army, usurps King Richard, and becomes the king. They never learn. In Act 4, Scene 2, Aaron says, "The old man," meaning Titus Andronicus, "have found their guilt." In Pericles, Prince of Tyre, King Antiochus, talking about Pericles, says, "He hath found the meaning of the riddle of his incestuous relationship with his own daughter." And finally, at the end of the play, Saturninus' body is conveyed away, just like the bodies of Romeo and Juliet, Antony and Cleopatra, and Hamlet. Next up, we'll look at some interesting facts about Titus Andronicus. In preparing to do this episode, I did some research and I came across some interesting facts. Most historians believe that Titus Andronicus was Shakespeare's first tragedy and his first play to appear in print. Some call this play Shakespeare's bloodiest and least respected work, but it was not unusual to find such violence in other works of the same era, including the Spanish tragedy by Thomas Kyd. And according to Ben Jonson, it was very popular in Shakespeare's day. It was also his first Roman play, but unlike Julius Caesar, Coriolanus, and Antony and Cleopatra, Titus Andronicus was a work of fiction and not based on true historical events or people. In fact, the title is believed to come from the story of Androcles, or Andronicus and the Lion, in which the Emperor Titus throws a slave named Andronicus to a lion to be slaughtered. However, it turns out that the lion is the same one that Andronicus had befriended once before by removing a thorn from its paw. In case you're wondering, Titus Andronicus contains more murders than any other Shakespeare play. By my count, there are 14, including Alarbus, Mutius, Bassianus, Quintus, Mardius, the nurse, Cornelia the midwife, the clown, Chiron, Demetrius, Lavinia, Tamara, Titus, and Saturninus. That would be more than Richard III with 11, King Lear with 10, and Hamlet with a mere 8 murders. It's hard to look at all of the sufferings that Titus Andronicus endured and not think of the biblical story of Job. Job was a good and prosperous family man who was suddenly beset with horrendous disasters that God permitted Satan to inflict on him. Satan took away everything that Job held dear in order to test Job's faith in God. However, Job never blamed God for anything that happened to him, and unlike Titus Andronicus in the end, he was greatly rewarded. There are also some anachronisms in Titus Andronicus, especially in the 1985 BBC Shakespeare version of the play. For example, it opens with young Lucius wearing glasses throughout the entire play, but the play takes place in ancient Rome around 390 AD. Eyeglasses weren't invented until the late 13th century. By the way, in the BBC version of Cymbeline, Cornelius is also wearing glasses, and there is a globe of the world in the scene in which Caius Lucius is looking for the Roman tribute, even though the play takes place earlier than Titus Andronicus, right around the same time as the birth of Christ, when most people still thought the world was flat. In addition, Shakespeare included Ovid's Metamorphosis and a quote from Horace, which Kieran claims he read in the grammar long ago. But even though these references would have been read by people in Shakespeare's day, it's unlikely that a Goth would have read about them in school in the 4th century AD. By the way, Horace's quote translates as, "The man who is of pure life and free from crime needs not the bows and arrows of the Moor." Oh, and the Goth who captured Aaron said he was gazing upon a ruined monastery, but it was actually ruined during the time of Henry VIII. In the play, the hunting party was looking for panthers. So, were there panthers in ancient Rome? According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the answer is yes. In addition to gladiator contests, the amphitheater was used for venationes, which were spectacles involving the slaughter of wild animals such as lions, panthers, rhinoceri, and even elephants by trained hunters. These events were expensive and used to advertise the wealth and generosity of the officials who sponsored them. Although this story is fictional, the Goths were real. They were a Germanic people who lived in what today would be parts of the Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. And finally, in 1955, the Royal Shakespeare Company put on its best-known and most popular production of Titus Andronicus, starring Laurence Olivier as Titus, Anthony Quayle, who plays Falstaff in the BBC Shakespeare versions of Henry IV Part 1 and 2, as Aaron, and Vivian Leigh from Gone with the Wind as Lavinia. When we return, we'll look at some of the great actors in the 1985 BBC Shakespeare version of Titus Andronicus. Let's take a look at some of the actors in the 1985 BBC Shakespeare version of Titus Andronicus. The outstanding Trevor Peacock, who plays Titus Andronicus, also played Feste the Jester in 1980 in Twelfth Night, Lord Talbot in Henry VI Part 1, Jack Cade and the Sheriff in Henry VI Part 2, both in 1983, Bolt in Pericles, Prince of Tyre in 1984, and the first gravedigger in Mel Gibson's version of Hamlet in 1990. Brian Prothero, who plays Saturninus, also played the Bastard of Orleans in Henry VI Part 1, Edward Plantagenet in Henry VI Part 2, and he becomes King Edward IV in Henry VI Part 3, as well as in Richard III, all in 1983. Derek Fuke, who plays a captain, also played Lord Talbot's captain and Gloucester's servant in Henry VI Part 1, various roles in Henry VI Parts 2 and 3, and also appears in Richard III, all in 1983. John Benfield, who plays several roles, including Caius, also plays the jailer in The Winter's Tale in 1981, various roles in Henry VI Parts 1 and 2. In Henry VI Part 3, he plays the Earl of Northumberland, along with other roles, all in 1983. Anna Calder Marshall, who plays Lavinia, also played Hermione in The Winter's Tale in 1981. Peter Searles, who plays Alarbus and other roles, also played the Second Company in Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3, and in Richard III, all in 1983. And finally, Nicholas Gex, who plays Bassianus, also played Lord Frederick Verisopht and other parts in the spectacular 1992 Broadway production of The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. And now, get ready for today's trivia challenge, which is called I Was Only Sleeping. All right, now it's time for today's trivia challenge, which is called I Was Only Sleeping. Based on these descriptions, name the plays and the characters who were thought to be dead but were only sleeping. Number 1, after drinking an evil queen sleeping potion and waking up in a cave. Number 2, after taking a friar's compound and awaking in the family crypt. And number 3, after being presumed to have died in childbirth at sea and waking with the aid of Lord Cerimon. When we return, we'll have the answer to these trivia questions, along with some relevant lessons from Titus Andronicus. All right, now let's see how you did on today's trivia challenge, which was called I Was Only Sleeping. Based on these descriptions, you were to name the plays and the characters who were thought to be dead, but were only sleeping. Number 1, after drinking an evil queen sleeping potion and waking up in a cave, that was Imogen and Cymbeline. Number 2, after taking a friar's compound and awaking in the family crypt, that was Juliet and Romeo and Juliet. And number 3, after being presumed to have died in childbirth at sea and waking with the aid of Lord Cerimon, that was Thaisa in Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Now, let's finish up with some relevant lessons from Titus Andronicus. First, don't let the sun go down upon your anger. So much heartache could have been spared had both Titus and Tamara not been so hell-bent on revenge. Someone once told me that an elderly relative of mine had Sicilian Alzheimer's, explaining that she can't remember anything except the grudges. I urge you not to be this way, so learn how to forgive faster. Next, when hiring employees, make sure your applicants are qualified. Saturninus was so bad a ruler that he probably couldn't lead a group in silent prayer. Your applicants need to have their references checked, make sure you ask what their top 3 values are, and make sure that they're compatible with your business culture. And finally, teach your children to forgive and forget by showing them through your own example. As Jesus taught, turn the other cheek. And don't be taken in by rumors or gossip. Remember, what somebody else thinks about you is none of your business. I'm Dave Romeo, and thanks so much for watching this episode of Romeo and Shakespeare. Please join me next time, and you will see some lovers in a forest, and what fools these mortals be.